Deepwatch provides innovative managed security services that empower organizations to be more resilient against today's evolving cyber threats. Deepwatch offers game-changing capabilities in managed detection and response, managed endpoint detection and response, and vulnerability management. All delivered through a unique squad model, a dedicated group of security experts that works directly with each client. From managed security operations to threat hunting to continuous measurement of security readiness, Deepwatch is advancing the service of managed security. Measure your SecOps maturity for free by visiting securityweekly.com/Deepwatch. Most breaches are caused by exploiting oversights in basic cybersecurity fundamentals, but complex hybrid multi-cloud infrastructures make cybersecurity hygiene challenging. Red Seal can help. It shows you what's on your network, how it's connected, and the associated risk across public cloud, private cloud, and physical environments. With Red Seal, you'll get control of your cybersecurity fundamentals so you can protect your organization from the inevitable attack vectors and reduce your cyber risk. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/Red Seal.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian and Jason Albuquerque. Do you want to stay in the loop on all things Security Weekly? Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe on your favorite podcast catcher or our YouTube channel. Sign up for our mailing list and join our Discord server and be able to ask questions live like we just did in the previous segment. Also, if you missed Security Weekly Unlocked, you can access all the content on demand, whether you registered before the live event or not, by visiting securityweekly.com/unlocked and clicking either the button to register or the button to log in. Gentlemen, before we get into articles, I was just thinking about the game last night. As people know, the Browns finally made it to the playoffs, right? And they beat the Steelers. But think about this for a second. Their head coach is out of commission, right? He's on COVID-19 protocol for a second. He can't communicate with the team. He can't do anything. They've got assistant coaching and all these people playing. I mean, think about the leadership communication, like planning that had to go into being able to execute a game plan and actually pull that game out. I thought it was, I was thinking about the show today. I'm like, think about that for a second from a team perspective and from a leadership communication perspective. Be able to plan all that in advance and then execute it live.
Yeah, I mean, unbelievable. And especially if you watch the first half, because you know they were locked into their game plan, right? And you know, the first half, I was astounded at that game. It blew my mind, right?
And underscores the need to have a really awesome quarterback versus a head coach.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Hey, Tampa.
Right, but I didn't watch the entire game. I caught quite a bit of it. And the QB for the Browns, what's the QB for the Browns?
Baker Mayfield.
Mayfield was, he was on point. I watched his throws. I'm like, that dude's on point right now. And it is a team effort, Matt, to your point, right? Like, there has to be some leadership lessons, communications that are on point, as well as the players have to be on point. Also, as with things in professional sports, like a little bit of luck, right? Like the turnovers with a little bit of luck. I can't sit here as a Patriots fan and go, we haven't benefited from a little bit of luck every now and again, right? Like that definitely, it's not gonna be the thing that builds your dynasty or makes you win the Super Bowl, but like those things to help, because don't forget, you get things in the other way too, like really crummy calls that have happened in the NFL. It goes the other way, so it kind of balances out and forces you to go back on like your players have to play well and have a well executed game plan.
Every single player executing on what they were meant to execute upon.
But now translate that to cybersecurity, like the same things I just said, absolutely 100% apply to business leadership and cybersecurity.
All
right?
day long.
Like,
all day long.
Sometimes I just told my HVAC story, right? Like sometimes they go in your favor. Like I just happened to be like, I just traded a patio set for some electrical work for our new studio setup. Like that was kind of awesome. Like there was a little bit of luck to play.
That's part of your strategy. What are you talking about?
Like I can't say that I strategized and left my crummy patio set out front and knowing that someday I might trade it for electrical work, but
But at the end of the day, you have a good risk mindset, and you said, you want to know what, that patio furniture is not.
Some days you're going to be responding to a security incident, right? Because I've been also on the flip side of that. I've been in Disney World covering an event where I've had to spend all of my non-event time doing forensics on our website because it got hacked. And that stuff happens too.
Yeah. And we got some good articles in here. The first one was this interesting a business information security offer, this BISO role, right? This new role that's evolving, that's kind of bridging the gap between the board and the cybersecurity team. I was curious, Jason, have you seen other organizations? I mean, they list out some of the orgs that have them.
I have.
You know,
and we've talked about this on the show, Matt. We've talked about this. We've talked about having, and I call it the business analyst level for security out there in the organization, right? IT did this a while back. IT has that analyst role that goes out there and looks at the different business units, is embedded in the different business units, is learning the business, right? And security has now matured to that point where we have to be doing this. We have to have folks embedded in the business, knowing what finance is doing, knowing what HR is doing, really being in tune with the business, so that way, you know, that information can bubble up to the CISO or whatever your security leader is, and you can make good corporate decisions across every business unit.
And this may not be a single role in some of these organizations. True. There could be multiple BSOs if you think about the size of some of these organizations.
100%. For a larger organization, it has to be, right? I mean, one person isn't going to have the bandwidth to be able to know how every single business unit acts and interacts with the organization and know the details of it. Happy birthday.
I mean, it was, I could see it. You saw, if you're watching the video, you saw a glass of scotch slide into frame as Jason was talking.
And
I can't say that I planned that.
It made me flip my focus over to happy birthday.
That's it. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Cheers.
We're celebrating with scotch.
That's it.
Wish you were here, Matt.
That's what you should celebrate. I do as well. It was funny. I just opened up the 25 Glen.
God.
Moron. Yeah. Because Lauren's like, why is that big box up there? I'm like, that's a good point. That was for my 50th. I got to pull this. I got to start drinking this.
And I tell you, I delved into that Glen Moray 25 because I bought a bottle for myself, and I hadn't around even before Christmas. I hadn't opened it. And I did, and I was like, "Oh my God!" Now I know why I try and hide this from myself, because it's so good.
Yeah, it's been a little while that we've built our relationship, Paul, and it was only this year that we realized our birthdays are so close to each other.
Because we're at that age where we don't want to focus on birthdays.
Yeah, you're only one day apart.
That's awesome.
Oh, so funny. Oh, gosh. Next story. 7 cybersecurity priorities CISOs should focus on for 2020.
We know this.
For 2021. We covered a similar story last week, too.
Yeah.
We know this.
I mean, this was, it's the same old stuff, I think. There was, the order was interesting to me. Right, a little bit. Again, I when I read these articles, I kind of read them in order, and I'm like, okay, I get the first one, but then it's like you jump to invest in cloud security without implementing basic IT hygiene, looking at borderless security, creating a culture. It's like, really, do you just dive in like to number 2? I think there's a few other pieces here that make sense.
It's interesting as we're putting our agenda together for labs as well. It's interesting we're talking about starting with things like attack surface management and vulnerability management, because I think in terms of this list, and I mean, focus for the year or whatever, I think focus in your program, it's super important, because they both speak to helping you build and maintain that basic level of hygiene. Right? Because it's not just you can't just build basic hygiene and then forget about it.
Right.
It's something just like, I guess it's a horrible analogy, but a good analogy in some cases, right? So forgive the analogy, like brushing your teeth and the other things we do as personal hygiene, right? But in this sense, I thought those two topics, for me, are really exciting this year. I think attack surface management is exciting because the automation to help you discover the external threats is so super important, and it's not the sexiest, right? It's not what we're talking about with the SolarWinds breach, where it's third party, getting a foothold in your systems. But like that doesn't even come up on your radar unless you understand your external threats. And vulnerability management is so important in terms of that basic hygiene. Again, if someone does implant malware into my systems and does not use a vulnerability, that's the things I want to focus on. I don't want to be spinning, and we just talked about this last Thursday, and what I took away from the interview and segment with Vicarious was, I don't want to spin my cycles on vulnerability management anymore. I don't. I want to allow my prioritization to be informed, to use machine learning and AI to form my prioritization, and I want to just automatically fix this.
Well, we
stuff.
talked about in the previous segment, right? Get rid of the run. Try to get rid of the run as much as you can. Automation, partnerships, things of that nature. Get rid of that run because you want to be focusing on the growth and transformation of your organization. It's imperative, right? I will say that being on this podcast for the past 2 years, right? 101 episodes at this point, right? I will put something out there to the authors of these articles and say, notate whether or not this is order of priority, right? Because again, they have 1 through 7, but is this in order of priority in your view, or is this just literally thrown out there 7 items?
Yeah,
right?
I think they take from the backlog and like mix the order up.
I don't know, right? But for me, you know, I look for that now, and I, you know, when they give us a list of here are the things you want to do, is it in order of priority in your opinion? Or are you just listing 7 things?
You got to take that as with a grain of salt. Because I think one of the things missing, perhaps from this list, I don't know if you could lump it into there, but with zero trust, again, I get it. The term, it's not the right term, but it's an increased level of trust. And I think that when you're looking at your software supply chain, that there you have to be applying and plan on applying a lot of that trust. What's going into the software that I'm building and what's going into my systems that I'm building, and looking at that from those different angles, right? In your SDLC, it's going to look slightly different than it is from I'm building out, you know, cloud infrastructure, cloud natives, or whatever the case may be. I'm building out my IT infrastructure versus I'm building a software product. Maybe you build a software product to support your operations and infrastructure like we do here at Security Weekly. But you have to be once you get the basic hygiene stuff and that's humming along, I think based on some of the breaches we've seen, some of the more like devastating ones really center around being able to trust your supply chain and your software.
No, absolutely. And you know, that number 1, make cybersecurity a boardroom agenda. There's so many pieces that fall underneath that, right? So many pieces. I mean,
there's a whole
your risk
priority
management,
list.
your asset management. I mean, you have to have that context of your organization to be able to do that and be able to speak to your board about business risk, because they're really not going to care about how you're building a borderless security model.
No.
They're just they're not.
They're not.
Right? I mean, that's a good thing for you and your team to maybe have conversations around in the strategy, but that's not what you're going to be talking about with your board.
No. Well, you mentioned asset management. That's a great conversation with the board, because not only is there some business and cost savings you can bundle in there, but there's a huge security benefit to it because you can't
100%.
secure what you don't know about. But I can also tell you that there's 2 business units using the exact same software, and we need to consolidate. Maybe we need to find something to replace both, or we need to consolidate under both and use a federated identity so that we can apply controls and have auditing for all kinds of things, not just the SolarWinds breach, because we can only talk about that so long before it's going to be a distant memory, but it's going to be, I want to protect myself from insider threat, of all the different types of insider threats, all those things. I don't know, building list of priorities, again, like you said, somewhat subjective.
Totally.
The ISF article, so we can skip over, actually highlights these points, right, gentlemen? Talks about asset management and risk profiles and profiling threats and some of the things that you need to do. And we sometimes forget about this. We talk about basic hygiene. We're like, look, I think vulnerability management's good, Paul, right? That's a piece. Attack surface management is we move assets outside. But are we doing the basics around understanding what assets we have? What's the risk associated with those assets? How are we profiling threats? Sometimes we forget about that basic piece that wasn't covered in the previous articles. ISF talks about it here a little bit in their article. This is one still, I think, big gap for a lot of organizations.
No, I 100% agree. And again, it's the details and the context, right? Because you could be looking at legacy software that the risk of that software totally outweighs, right? Keeping it within your organization. Right? I mean, in many instances, organizations don't want to spend the money to get newer platforms or newer application platforms or some line of business systems, things of that nature.
But at the same time, they don't want to spend money maintaining and limping along what they not even limping along, but maintaining that at a level, right? So you got your legacy application, like the kind of state that we're in. Now we got to go build a React interface because that technology is available, widely deployed, and that's what the users are expecting.
Absolutely. But basically my point to that was, you know, you look at that the 4th article and it says estimating financial loss, right? And a lot of times you're not bringing that context into the boardroom or into your executive team saying, by keeping this legacy application running and alive, here's what it really costs. It's not just the maintenance bill. It's not just the people you have managing it. It's beyond that. It's bigger than that, right? And one of the big stories that I have is, one of our customers, major company when it comes to retail, right? And they limped along with a legacy PBX system for a very, very long time, simply because they didn't want to make this massive investment globally, right, to upgrade their PBX system. But what the leader of that organization did was they came to us and said, listen, we want you to come look at this as an expert in unified communications. Give us a risk profile. What are the risks that having this globally brings to the table, right? And what's that cost around that? That actually gave them
operational risk, security risk, all playing
all
your
of the
PBX,
above, right?
Yeah.
And then the management risk, the people that they'd have to bring on the organization to properly support it. That gave them the conversation at the executive level to be able to invest in a new platform, right? So
that was a case I would venture to guess that it's going to cost us more to maintain this legacy PBX than to go with basically a VoIP system and unified communication.
And potential risk of here's what would happen with basically the threat landscape of having all of these legacy endpoints and legacy technologies and legacy applications, right? They didn't just have to keep that ecosystem, that they didn't have to keep that core PBX legacy. They had to keep the ecosystem legacy because of all the interactions. You got to think voicemail, right? Basically the management software for their agents, right? So all of that legacy ecosystem had to stay in play as well. And then they couldn't grow and transform the organization because they were stuck. But, the leader was very smart and said, hey, come in here as experts, do an eval, top to bottom, of risk to the organization. Technology risk, business risk, all of it. And that's what won the investment for them to upgrade. Multi-million-dollar investment. But they realized that was the better investment, right? Not deferred maintenance. Like they did for a decade or more, right?
Well, and they built some technical debt into
exactly.
They shot themselves in the foot with technical debt.
Right.
So we covered an article. It was a joint report from Synopsys and the Center for Software Integrity and Quality, and they actually measured the amount of money it was costing to have poor security in your applications. And it was interesting because you guys have hit on a couple of the components. They measured that the cost of poor software was $2 trillion. $1.5 trillion of that was just from not patching systems and the patch management and the vulnerability stuff we had already talked about. The other $500 billion was supporting legacy software and legacy systems, and that was costing organizations about $500 billion a year. Tech debt they measured completely separately is another $1.3 trillion cost to organizations by having all this accumulated tech debt. So you guys hit on these pieces, and there's actually reports that break some of this stuff down if people want to go find it.
No, absolutely. I know businesses who literally their core business is supporting customers who have legacy platforms. That's how they make all their money, right? Because they realize that they can't find the people to do it anymore. The vendors and manufacturers no longer offer support, but these organizations don't want to jump jump off. So they're literally their entire business model is supporting legacy ecosystems.
Yeah, because how do you hire a telecommunications engineer
from 1970s technology?
Right. Which, don't get me wrong, it's cool. And a lot of those people work for the phone companies, now internet providers, right? And there's a niche for that still, but it's not. If you're getting a degree in that, I think you're more into the unified communications aspect of it, right?
That's it.
It's more of a networking person, which is interesting. Is we talk about the progression of a lot of these career paths, all are more technology driven.
And hey, by the way, the networking person is now a DevOps person, right?
Yep.
I mean, I never thought I'd see the day of networking folks on GitHub sharing code, but we are, right?
Yeah.
All roads lead to that. It's amazing.
And lots of breaches in repositories. So what happens when you have an incident? Who's going to support you in court? Which law firm should you look at? This article is interesting on the 5 questions you should ask prospective corporate lawyers if you're a CISO, knowing that you need some legal protections later. Yeah,
I mean, just from my experience, look at a law firm that's just not, their core talent, right? Look at the partnerships that they have as well, because not every law firm is going to be expert at everything unless they're one of the major, global law firms, right, or national law firms. And I can say when GDPR was rearing its head, the partnership that our attorneys had was immense, right? I mean, literally, I was on the phone with the UK, every other day preparing for that. So it's, it's the partnerships. It's what they can bring to the table, the talent they can bring to the table.
Yeah, I think I told the story last year when it happened. One of my friends, he CEO of a company, they had this business email compromise that wired money overseas, right? Yep. I pointed them to places where I knew guys could help, right? And it was great. I'm lucky that we know who some of those people are and where those relationships are. But I mean, if you're a major organization, does your existing law firm have some of these connections? Are they in a position to actually help you through a breach or an incident? And I thought this was a good article for people to kind of start to look at, do I have the right people protecting me later?
Yeah, 100%. And part of the key is making sure, as a security leader, risk leader, compliance leader within your organization, get connected with your legal counsel. Get connected with whatever business unit has that relationship, right? And stress the importance of having those conversations, because sometimes a security team doesn't have that ability to have conversations with your legal counsel. Push it, right? Push that relationship. Build a relationship with your legal counsel. It'll benefit you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did the ISF article. So now I go to, leaders ask good questions. And this one resonated with me because kind of in my new role at Cyber Risk Alliance, I'm asking lots of questions. And it's interesting, right? Because depends on who you ask the question to is which answer you get. And is it really the right answer, right?
100%.
And so I'm digging into this and I'm like, ask big questions. I do, right? What if we change this? What if we did that? Because you're going to get a lot of people go, I haven't thought about that. Or, whoa, I don't want that to happen, right?
Right.
And I'm doing it like every day. And I'm like, yes, involve others, right? The sales team. We're talking to the events team, right? We're talking to the audience and the marketing team, right? You've got to involve all these other teams because everybody has a little piece of the puzzle. Right. And what I'm trying to do is solve this interesting puzzle around our portfolio and our offerings and our sponsorship packages and stuff. And there's a lot of people involved.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll say, going back to what we talked about earlier was order of priority of these, 1 through 3 here. And for me, culture, I think, is the top, right? Because as a leader in the organization, if the culture isn't already there to allow you to ask questions, help build that culture. Because, I put in big asterisks in my notes, challenge the process. You want folks who can be in your organization who are going to challenge the process. They're not doing it because, they want to put down a particular person or a business unit, right? Build a culture where that's something that is expected, something that is championed, something that you celebrate. Because challenging the process only makes you better as an organization. You want people challenging the process all day, every day.
And that's what I'm doing, Jason, which is the interesting part, right? Is I'm trying to think about things in a different light, from a different perspective, right? We're cybersecurity professionals that have worked in the industry for a long time, worked with a lot of our sponsors, right? So I'm bringing a different perspective into the organization, trying to change our culture a little bit to say, do we have the right process?
That's it.
Just because we did it this way for 3 years, does it mean that's the way we should do it for the next three? I'm not sure.
Right.
I was quoted as saying today, like, my job is to take you out of your comfort zone.
That's it.
And that's
100%. 100%. That's a wonderful thing. And it's a must-have these days, right?
Yeah.
To one of the items is promoting innovation and highlighting innovation, right? But at the end of the day, unless you're challenging the process, unless you're bringing that to the table, and unless you have folks comfortable with that, you're not going to achieve that outcome, right? Being out of your comfort zone just going to mean you're that much more innovative, and you're really thinking things through at a deep level. But the one thing that I took a lot of notes on, which I think, it would only benefit folks as they're asking big questions and challenging the process. When you look at the portion that says involve others, I want you to think of others as just not your peers in the organization, other employees in the organization, your board. I want you to think of it in the context of clients, prospects, partners, right? You have to involve people outside the industry. How many times have we sat here after a show and talked about things that are going on in our lives, right? Where I can bring that back to my organization, and my organization benefits from it, or Security Weekly benefits from that conversation. Involve others in your peer network everywhere, right? Make those connections. When you're asking those big questions, ask them around the horn.
And I'm asking these of our customers, our sponsors, like, what are you seeing? What's working? What's not working? Because I want that, to your point, I want that perspective as well. I want to build better programs. And that means not only internally, but externally.
Yep.
What are our sponsors looking for? What is innovative in the things that they're seeing? Can we integrate those back in, Jason, to your point?
Yeah.
And obviously a lot of peer conversations, but we have to be external in this conversation as well.
All day long. And think of the power when you go back to other leaders or your executive team and you say, other organizations in our industry are doing this. Our partners are recommending that. Manufacturers are recommending this. And hey, by the way, here's what our clients are actually cheering for and they want, right? They want this to come out of our organization. That's immense amount of power you can bring to the table when you can bring that level of context, because now the executive team can make well-informed decisions based on all of this feedback and all of this data gathering that you're bringing back.
Yes. And one of the potential outcomes is the negative side of this, which is why I paired it with this next article, because this instinctively happens at times, right? Sure. Maybe the organization doesn't want to change culture, and a lot of the work that you're doing is going to be turned more to the negative side. How do you handle that? How do you come in as somebody who's trying to make the right changes for the organization, but it's viewed negatively? Sure. Look, I've had plenty of times in my career where that's happened on the other side of the coin, right? Where you're your best intentions to move things forward, but it just turns up to be negative on the other side. And so I paired it with this article because I've lived through this on the other side.
Yeah. And I look at negativity as a perspective, right? Because at the end of the day, you may be taking it as negative, but maybe it's something the organization isn't ready to do yet. Yeah. Maybe it's something your leaders aren't ready to accept yet. You're there for a job. You're there because folks want you to bring your opinion and your business knowledge and your security knowledge to the table. But at the end of the day, they're not always going to go with exactly what you want, right? And that's why we've talked about this before, that always try to build toward an outcome. You could come to the table and say, here's my plan to achieve X, Y, Z. And the organization says, wait a minute, well, hold on. We're not ready for that yet. So you take a step back, you rethink it and say, how can I get to that same outcome maybe in a different way? Right? And you really have to take it back and think about it. Maybe as a leader, you delivered the message wrong. Right? Maybe you can deliver it a different way. Maybe you can build a different strategy to bring everybody on board, get everybody on the bus, right? And it's an iterative process where you take steps to get there.
Exactly. And maybe it's you leave things exactly as is, build some structure around other components, then over time measure and make those changes for a better outcome in the future. Because I'm living this right now, which is why I brought these two articles in, is because I'm trying to learn a broader portfolio, trying to learn what's working, what's not working, and how do we as an executive team start to make changes for the better outcome later. And I can tell you, it's not all going to be what I originally kind of envisioned. It's going to be pieces that have to get integrated in different ways to achieve the final outcome longer term, because it's not that easy to change the ship that quickly.
That's it. You can't spin an aircraft carrier on a dime. It doesn't happen, right?
I like the number one, don't let your emotions get the best of you.
Totally.
Because I think I used to be of the opinion that it's not about feelings. And I think it's not about feelings all the time. Right. Because what I've learned is, and probably should have learned it sooner, but empathy is about feelings.
Right.
So you can't discount that entirely. I think largely not about feelings until such time when there is. And I think that's a good quality for a good or great leader, is knowing when to make some things about feelings, which I think is 100%. Less of the time. Because like I said, empathy, you got to understand other people's feelings, their perspective on things, how they're feeling about something, I think is important. So I thanks to you folks and these articles from the great authors, I've learned, definitely learned that as a skill. Yep. And I think reflecting on learning opportunities, you got to reflect on your failures as well. Totally. Some probably more so than your successes.
Yeah, I mean, the successes are what they are. You did the right thing. Yeah, it's repeatable.
Right.
How do you take How do you take something that didn't necessarily go your way, learn from it, and then change the outcome next time? Next time you get that shot, right? Change that outcome. But defensive is bad, right? Never let them see you sweat, right? If there's a decision that doesn't go your way, it's okay. Take it back, reflect on it, see what you can be doing different. And you know, as a leader in an organization, at some point, sometime, maybe it'll happen. Maybe either you'll outgrow the organization or the organization outgrows you, or, you know, when there's not that fit anymore, you'll know it, right? You'll know when it's not a fit. And that, you know, for me in my career, that's when I've said, you know what, maybe it's time for a change, right? So, you know, it's a scenario where you go through these decisions and it gives you a level of context to success. It gives you a level of context to the culture, right? And you can make good decisions for yourself from there.
Absolutely. And yeah, to your point, that last one, that action plan for yourself. Sometimes it's staying with an action plan, and sometimes that action plan is going to find another spot.
It happens. It happens.
Yeah, it does.
It's the natural cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Next week's a holiday, so we'll see you in 2 weeks on Business Security Weekly.